Living my bucolic life, free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Welcome back to, oops, just knocked my microphone off. Okay, welcome back to a new project. If you were watching last week when I made those pleated pants with the terrible instructions, I'm using that same pattern because at the same time I cut out these pants, I also cut out this little bias cut camisole top. So this should be way faster and easier than last week's video, thankfully. But I wanted to point out a couple things. First of all, this is a fairly short camisole. And in this picture, it looks like it's a long one and tucked in and everything. Well, this is a very high-waisted pant. So not a whole lot down below. If you're gonna want a longer camisole, extend the length, okay? Also, the front and back pieces are the same. It's just one piece that you cut out twice. Once for the front, once for the back. I did not extend mine because I ran out of fabric and I was just trying to fit it in what I had there. But if you would normally have to do like a full bust adjustment and everything, which, you know, in a full bust adjustment, not only do you get wider this way, but you get bigger this way, which means that I am fully expecting that that front hemline is going to go up. What this means to me is I will probably wear this only over something that it can be untucked and I have like a high-waisted legging or something under it that's going to hide my belly, because I'm thinking, at this point, I'm just thinking that that front hemline is going to be a little bit shorter. So just throwing this out there now, if I make this pattern again, I will be adjusting that front piece to be both lower and, well, I would make the front and back longer. But let me tip the camera down and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so ignore the big splotch on my tissue paper because I got actually a little bit of sewing machine oil on the tissue. I don't think it has gone through to the fabric. I was trying to make sure it didn't, but you know, things happen. So this is the piece I was telling you about. And I have a new light. I'm trying more lighting here. So hopefully the lighting down here will be much better now if I can keep this light charged. So here is the piece. Now, this says it is for front and back, okay? They have the waistline marked here. And what I was trying to explain is if you usually do a full bust adjustment and like, you know, spread out an extra inch on each side or something, be fully aware that your waistband is also going to go up, okay? So that means this is going to go up. Okay, so welcome back. This looks terribly different, I know, than what you saw last time, and it's because I decided to start over. I was not happy with the idea that it wasn't going to fit right. And so I decided, first of all, I found out that I did not cut two facing pieces out. I only cut one out, and I was supposed to cut two out. I don't know why I only cut one out of the green fabric. And that started me down a path of why don't I just remake this correctly? So here we are. You might recognize this fabric. I made a top out of it, I think in the spring of this year. Lovely little top. And I have a scrap big enough that I think I can make this little camisole out of it. So what I'm going to be doing, a couple changes. First of all, I know this is upside down and backwards, but this piece 13. they want you to cut 2 of them out, one for the front, one for the back. I'm cutting them out separately because I'm going to make a change to the front version. Now, also, this is cut on a bias, and a top that's cut on a bias, you know, the bias is going to help it stretch and drape and things like that. But I still want to make sure I have enough width. Now, my shoulder placement and everything needs to stay at a size 16. But in lieu of a full bust adjustment and things like that, what I'm going to do is down here at the sides, I am going to basically cut out the size 18 from the armhole down, but leave size 16 up here. And that should give me what I need for my ample cleavage up at the top. Now, like I said, I'm going to cut out the back piece first, and right now I am looking around my table for my ruler and I'm not seeing it, so give me a second to go find that, and I'll show you how I'm going to extend this to size 18 because I already cut it off right here at the 16 cutting line. Okay, so to make this pattern a larger size than what I have here, what I'm doing is I'm measuring the distance from my current cutting line to the size just below it, okay? And I can see that they have a 1/2 inch difference between those 2 cutting lines. So to make it up to the next size, I am just going to draw a line a 1/2 inch bigger. And I can just kind of run my ruler underneath here along that side. Well, it looks like I ran out of ink. Pretend I had ink in my pen and I have a line going here, okay? That's going to be my new cutting line, and I'm going to do that for both sides and then cut everything else as it is on my pattern here. You know, the bottom, the armholes, everything else as is. All right, so I have my back cut out. I thought I had enough room, but if it was cut on the straight, I would have. But since this is cut on the bias, look at that. It's sticking out the edge. But I am determined to get this made out of this fabric, so what I'm going to do is just piece it, okay? Now I want to make sure that I have it sewn on where I need, so I need it basically a piece on from here to here. Okay, can you see that? That's extended out. So I'm just going to draw a couple little lines there. And this is on a straight, obviously, because that's the selvage edge. So I just tore a piece off of another piece of it. And so this is on a straight, obviously, because I tore it, so it's nice and straight there. So I'm going to make sure that I have it put up to that same area that I need extra fabric at here. And I'm going to go ahead and sew it, and I'm going to sew it just inside where the selvage edge is, because sometimes the selvage can be a little tricky. You know how it looks slightly different on the outside? Well, you probably can't see on the camera, but trust me, it's slightly different looking on the outside selvage than the outside regular fabric. So when I pin this together, I'm going to stitch it right along this line, okay, right here. And then just, I will serge that edge too. Once they're stitched, I'll serge it together, press it, and then I'll go ahead and finish cutting out my piece. Okay, so I think I've got enough on here. You know, I've heard piecing is period for historical garments. I think piecing is just practical sometimes. So hope you can see that. My little stand here is a little wonky this morning. What I need to do is I have put my pattern piece on here with the back piece attached that shows the little 1/2 inch extension on each side. And so that's going to remind me to make sure I cut my front out with that. But I need to cut this front part a little bit lower. And I am just guessing I need about 1.5 inches on the front, okay? Based on the amount that it's going to shorten by lifting up more, because let me see how I can explain this. If you're not familiar with it, most patterns are made for a B cup, okay? So a moderate, average breast size. Now, if you have a C cup, D cup, whatever, your girth around here may be the same, but you got extra room up here that you need to account for, okay? And I'm accounting for the width-wise of it by adding the extra over here, because there are no darts, there's no adjustments that way other than just making it wider on the sides. But in addition to, because you know, a bust is not 360 degrees, because that would be odd, but it's 180 degrees. It's a, you know, half sphere. So in addition to being wider, it's taller that way. And when it's taller this way, it's going to lift up the bottom more, okay? So as this gets lifted up more, the bottom comes up more. And you end up, if you don't make an adjustment, having a bottom hem that's like this, higher in the front than in the back, okay? So with all that being said, I am guessing that I need, just because of my own body proportions, about an extra 1.5 inches at the bottom. So they have a center line here. I'm just going to put my ruler up against that line and at a 1.5 inch place down here at the bottom, I'm just going to make a line down here that shows where the 1.5 inch place is. And I need to try to make this somewhat symmetrical. So what I think I'm going to do is draw in on one side, and then I will fold that in half and just cut it to match on the other side. I could just, you know, draw it. I'm just going to try to blend it from this side where the seam allowance is. So at about the size 16 cutting line, which is 1/2 inch in, right around where the seam allowance would be. I'm going to try to start there and just kind of draw down to where this 1.5 inch line is, okay? Like so. So at this point, I'm not going to cut from here over, but I'm going to cut everything else around it. Okay, so now that that is cut all the way around, I am going to fold this piece in half at this, you know, center line here, kind of match up my side edges, like so, and just use my cut edge here to match to the other side and trim it off so that it is the same here. And there you go. That is now my front piece. Okay, so you can see on the back here, that is where I spliced it. Okay, and then I just serged over the edge after I sewed it together. Pressed it open. I have a newly cut out piece. I still need to cut out my facings. Now on the facing, because I added to the sides here, I need to make sure I also add that same 1/2 inch to each side of my facing when I cut 2 of these out. And I have these little straps that I also need to cut out. I am running low on scraps over here, so if I can't fit this on a bias like it's marked, I'll put it on the straight for a strap. I don't think that that matters. But let me go ahead and get these cut out, and then we'll start assembling it again. I want to point out that I did not have enough fabric to cut my facing on a bias. I am cutting it on the straight of grain, and I think that's going to be okay. For me, the critical part is that this piece, the big one, is cut on the bias, because there's not a lot of draping that happens with this little facing, and once it is sewn here and finished on the bottom, you only have a couple inches going on. There's not a lot of drape that happens in there. So I think cutting the facing on the straight is okay. If I had enough fabric, yes, I would be cutting it on the bias, because that's what it's asking for, and that would jive with the whole mood of this one a lot better as far as the way that the grain is going, but not an emergency this way. Okay, so at this point I got my strap cut on the bias, cut out this on the bias, this on the straight. I am going to go ahead and interface my 2 facing pieces. I'm just going to use my regular lightweight fusible interfacing that I use on 90% of what I do here. So if you haven't seen it before, this is what I'm talking about. You know, very lightweight. I'm going to fuse that to these 2 pieces, and then we'll get started putting it together. Okay, so I have the interfacing ironed on here, like that. just setting that aside, we're going to deal with these straps first. There are a few dots on here. I'm not actually going to transfer those over yet because I'm going to be ironing this, and since I use a heat erasable pen, it will disappear as soon as I do. But what I'm going to do is fold these together, right sides together first along the edges, so I have a nice crease and it's in half. Because these are very narrow, that'll help me to get a better accurate stitching line along the side. Okay, so on this piece, you know, it's symmetrical, but the side that has your little circles to punch out at your cut size, that's going to go on the back. The side that has this thing that says adjustable and has a couple circles way up high, a couple inches from the bottom, that's going to go in the front, just to let you know. So at this point, I'm just going to line up the edge here, and the circle is going to be at the level of your stitching line. And so this is a narrow stitching line. It looks like about 3/8 of an inch. You can measure it from the cutting edge to the center of the circle, and yes, that is 3/8 of an inch. And does it say? Yeah, it says in the instructions 3/8 of an inch. So just to make my life easier, I am just out of curiosity going to measure the distance over here. All right, so 3/8 is dead center of my little strap. That's going to make a very narrow strap, almost like a spaghetti strap. And if that is what you are comfortable with, go for it. I'm going to give it a shot. Sometimes turning really narrow straps can be a real pain, but you know, we will do it. We will deal with that when it comes. I'm drawing a line down here just to make sure I have a really nice stitching line to follow. So once I have that, I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and just stitch right along my line on both of my straps. Okay, so they are going to want you to, with that, so there's no glare, they're going to want you to turn this with the needle and thread method. So we'll give that a shot, but first I am going to pink off about half of this seam allowance, because the less I have to turn to the inside, the easier it'll be. But I don't want to clip close enough that I'm going to risk, you know, bumping into my stitching line and have something pull out of sorts. So let me do that. Now I like to use a big old rounded end yarn needle, because that way it doesn't want to get caught on the way down. So that's what I'm going to use. Here's my problem. I can't put this needle on if I have to knot it at the end, if I have it doubled. And I want to have it doubled, but I can't because this is not going through this fabric. So what I'm going to do, put a knot at one end, put a regular needle on it, and that one has an eye too small, and put a regular needle on it, and then switch it over to the big needle. So up here, about 1/4 inch down. Okay, on the outside, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it, run it through twice just to hold it. Okay, so now that that end is secure, I'm going to pull off my small needle, put on my large needle, hold the extra end up here, and drop my large needle down inside. Hopefully it stays threaded. That's the goal. Okay, it did stay threaded, yay. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and just pull on these threads and try to ease the edge of this over the end. Don't like this method, because getting this started is kind of a pain. It does not want to go in on itself. You know what? I'm going to skip this method and go to my preferred way. So let me go ahead and go get a little tool that I have. Okay, I've had these since the 80s. I'm sure they make them somewhere, but I'm not too sure exactly what they're called. Sorry about that. Basically, it's a big long metal pipe, and this is a wire. It has some kind of a handle at the end that's twisted around to a little sharp point at the end, okay? So what you do is you slide the little pipe through, and I have two different sizes. You want to use the largest one that will fit, but it's barely fitting. I might have to use the smaller one. Let me do that because this is just a little too snug. Okay, this is a smaller one. This is like a 1/4 inch diameter. This is more of an 1/8 of an inch, but I think that will fit better. Okay, so I slide this all the way through to the end. Then I stick my little wire through, and you can see it's gonna have the little pokey part come through here, okay? I'm gonna pull it down just a hair. Now I tip the end of my fabric over the top, push it up and twist it until, I'm twisting the wire until that little pokey wire comes through. I hope you can see it. Starting to work through, and that's gonna hold my fabric. And now I use that to pull it through the center of the pipe. Okay, you can see it's just gonna kind of pull it in. And I just kind of work the fabric up and pull the wire from the bottom as I go. Okay, it's been a couple days since I was working on this stuff. I was off and doing things, and I just kind of left my table like this. So I'm assuming that we were turning these little spaghetti strap things. Look how narrow that turns out. I still need to press it, but it's very narrow. And while I was turning this one, my little springy thing came loose and popped out, you know, as they do. So I've just shoved a tiny diameter knitting needle in there. I'm trying to work it down that way. Might work, might not. I might have to start it all over again. You know, I don't like that. I am not a huge fan of spaghetti straps. They're kind of a headache. And I think that if I was to do this again, I would just make wider straps. You know, because this is too much grief for me. But I wanted to show you while I was out and about at the Pumpkin Festival, a friend of mine and I stopped at this place where they were it was a charity deal, and they had books, hardback books for $1. And I found this one. It looks like it's from the 80s, but it's kind of fun. So, you know, I just collect books, and you may know 90% of what's in a book, but there might be 10% that it's like, oh, well, that's a great idea. So, you know, I encourage you, just, you know, keep your eyes open. And you don't have to like search through everything, but sometimes just breezing through something will catch your eye, and it's like, oh, that's helpful, you know? So anyhow, just wanted to show you that book. I'll be going through it, you know, because we can keep learning things. For some reason, my lights are twitching here. So once I get my spaghetti strap thing turned, we can go on to the next part. And I was going to mention, if you wanted to try to make these, and you know, the first one worked great, it's just this one, this strap here that didn't. It's basically a metal straw. So I'm thinking if you wanted to do the thread and big needle technique in a reusable straw and use one that's, you know, sized so you can get your needle through, you'd be basically doing the same thing, you know. And the tube part is basically helping to get the turning easier at the very beginning. So anyhow, as you can see, I've got stuff to do on this one. I have the end of it right there. So that's not a whole lot. I'm just going to pick on it until I can see my little end, and then I'll pull it out, turn it, and iron these, and then we will finally get to the next step. Okay, so for the next step, they want me to work on my back piece. So since I cut my front one lower, down there you can see lower than the back, I'm going to be grabbing my shorter one. So let me pull this off here. So my shorter one is my back piece, my longer one is my front piece. Okay, and I'm going to be looking at the right side of my fabric. And this is just a little lightweight cotton, so not too worried, but you can see since it's cut on a bias, I do have, you know, a little stretch in unusual places, which is good. So up here at the very top, I have circles punched. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer those little, this circle is right on top of a black dot, so that won't show up. So I'm going to get my white chalk pencil to do that one. And over here, I will need to use this one. Okay. So this is my circle here. You can't see that. Oh, sorry about that. I've circled my circle so it's more obvious. And over here, I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little bullet around it. Okay. Now, what they want us to do is get our straps. And remember on the pattern piece, the part that was adjustable is the front. The part that is not is the back. And if we look at it, this is our pattern piece. This is where we sewed. So the seam line, 5/8 of an inch in, is where this dot is. So if I take one of my straps, okay, you can see that's the same diagonal there. This point right here, 5/8 of an inch in, here is what needs to match up with that dot. And it looks like it's going to stick up a little bit at the top. And that kind of looks like their instructions, so I think that's okay. Come on, pin for me. I just want to make sure that these straps are hanging pretty much straight down at this point. So let me get my other strap and place the seam line part 5/8 of an inch down from where this dot is and pin that right here. Come on, I'm almost stabbing myself. So if you can see the way it's placed, the folded edge of your strap is overshooting this corner up here. Okay, like, well, that one's a little bit off. Put it this way, like that, okay? So that corner is overshoot, this little strap is kind of overshooting the corner here, and this seam line is matched up with this dot. All right, that is in place. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my machine and just sew straight across up here, probably about a 1/4 inch in, just to lock these in place. I'm not going to serge all the way around this yet because this whole top part is going to be encased in the facing right here. I think what I'm going to do is just sew the sides with French seams and call it good, because these are really going to be the only exposed seams. So I'm not going to serge around it right now. So let me go ahead and stitch these up here and I'll be right back. Okay, so with these little straps hanging down, the next thing we're going to do is the side seams. So like I said, I'm going to do French seams for these. So what I am going to do that's a little different from their instructions is, well, that's a little wrinkled. First I'm going to sew it wrong sides together. Okay, and what I'm actually going to do is just do a really quick serge, and I have a 3 threads on my serger, so it's a small seam allowanced serge straight across here at both sides, locking both pieces of fabric together. Okay, so at this point I have my little side seams serged like that, and what I'm going to do is try to press it open first like this, and it doesn't really matter which side you press that tiny little seam allowance to, just press it to one side that you pick. Then with that pressed open like that, it's a lot easier to come back and flip it right side out, inside out. And now I'm going to press it flat here. And the reason I like to use a serger is because you get a very uniform 1/8 inch seam allowance, which makes it you know, super clean and easy for doing French seams. So basically at this point, if my first seam in here was about 1/8 of an inch in, somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4, okay? And I'm supposed to have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. That means that I need to make another seam here somewhere between 3/8 of an inch and 1/2 inch, okay? Because this is kind of cut on a bias, it doesn't have to be, you know, laser perfect, but you want something like that. It's definitely going to be a smaller seam allowance than 5/8, straight down here. And what that's going to do is encase the raw edge that is serged, you know, and give you a really pretty French seam when we're done. So at this point, my little French seam is made. I'm going to press that seam allowance towards the back on each side, like so. And now from the right side, you know, it looks like this, and this is the piece that I had to splice together. But honestly, this pattern is so busy, you know, it looks like a design option, you know, I'm going to call it that. And my seam allowance looks like this. I think that's nice and neat. And now we're going to go back to the table and get the facing placed. Okay, so it looks like what I need to do first is sew my facings together at the side seams. It's at a regular 5/8 inch seam allowance. And I think I mentioned the other day I have put my interfacing on these already. And when I cut these out, I did add the extra 1/2 inch on each side to increase the size of my facings to match up with the size of my top. Okay, so you can see that that's a little wider down there. Okay, so let me go ahead and pin these sides, sew them at 5/8 of an inch, and then press these seam allowances open. Alrighty, so I went ahead and serged the bottom edge while I was over there. Now I'm just going to lock in this little tail. Come on, I just have a tiny little hook. I think it's one of the ones for like the old hair color things. But anyway, lock that tail in underneath the serging and clip it so that it's not going to want to unravel or get into any mischief. And now we're ready to go ahead and match it up to the top of our blouse. Okay, so we have not attached the straps to the front. And what they want me to do is I need to show where these dots are. So I'm going to transfer over where my little dots are that match up the straps. Okay, and I'm going to circle them because, you know, they blend a whole lot. So you can see my little dot there is circled and over here. And they want me to not sew on 1/4 inch on either side of this dot. So you know what? I'm not going to be able to see that. I have to mark this on the wrong side. So, well, at least that will show up better. So pretend I did the same thing. I'm going to transfer over my little dots and draw a line at 1/4 inch on each side, but on the wrong side of my front piece. Okay, so with that marked, this is the same frontwards and backwards. All right, so I'm just going to slide it over, match my facing up here, right sides together, matching up my side seams, matching everything, and pinning it all together. Okay, so I have a feeling I'm just going to have to mark this on the facing because it's going to be, I want to do it their way to see what they are thinking. So if I draw a line up here where 5/8 of an inch is, okay, so where I'm drawing my little line here, that is, you know, the regular stitching line. And if the dot for my size looks like the dot is where these two are intersecting, okay? Now they want me to stop 1/4 inch from that dot, so I'm going to say this is my stitching line and I'm coming up around here. I'm going to stop there and then pick up over here and go down. Now the question is that wide enough to slide this little strap through? And I think it is, and I think that's the process, okay? So I'm actually going to go ahead and draw these lines on this side also, just so I have it exact. Stitch it at 5/8 of an inch, and then I'll be right back. Alrighty, so it's stitched on. Now before I can turn this, there's a whole lot of bulk up here. I'm just going to trim out, as you can see, with pinking shears. I'm actually going to trim down probably a couple inches along each side of my little corners here. Now these are the back ones that are stitched all the way up. Let me get these done first. It might not be a bad idea to go ahead and pink some of this seam allowance the entire way. I think I'm going to do that. Go ahead and cut about half of my seam allowance off with pinking shears. That should help it to flex more without having to make little notchy kind of clips in there as much. Now up here, I don't know if you can see, my stitching ended here and started up again there. So I'm going to do kind of like the other side where I just come in and clip this way. All right, and so you can see about how much I'm trimming off there. Let me go ahead and finish that all the way around the top stitching line of my facing. Alrighty, so now that that is done, I need to do some understitching so that my little edge line up here behaves nicely. So what that means is I want my seam allowance up, you know, underneath the facing edge, all right? And I'm going to do it in 4 different sections, the underarm areas and the front areas. You're not going to be able to get your presser foot in there because let's say I'm starting right here, all right? You know, just out of curiosity, if I pull this, how does it turn? Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. All right, so what I'm going to do is open this up as far as I can, which is going to probably be starting right about here. I'm going to go ahead and take the camera over to my machine so I can show you as I do this. It might make more sense that way. Today I am using, I haven't used her in a long time, my 15 from the 1950s. I had her set aside while I was moving things around in here, and so she is back, so she's the one I'm using. Right, so just have a regular straight stitch presser foot on there, and I'm going to start at the neckline area of the back, and I know it's the back because I have straps hanging here. Try to do this without bumping my camera too much. All right, so I'm opening it up enough that I can get my presser, this edge, the left edge of my presser foot in, and I'm going to kind of center that toe over the stitching line. Okay, that's going to be my guide. However you need to do it, make it so. Put the thread under that toe. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple stitches, back it up to lock it in just for fun, and then keep going and just centering this toe over the stitching line, but making sure what's left of my seam allowances are underneath where I'm sewing. Okay, I don't want them to tuck underneath the fabric of the bodice. I want them, sorry about that, to stay over here. Here it is, underneath the facing part. All right, so at this point, I can just open it up as I go. And with my fingers here, I can feel and make sure that that seam allowance is where I want it to be. And I'm just going to go until my presser foot won't go any farther, which is probably going to be at least an inch or so from this corner right here. Okay. Once it gets to the place where it's just not comfortable and you can't see what you're doing, go ahead and stop, put a back stitch in, and pull it out, and that part will be done. So this is what the understitching looks like, okay? And it goes on top of this back here. So that way when you fold it, you get a really nice edge up here. You don't see any stitching. Okay, so I've got it turned and pressed, and this is my front. You can see I've just kind of pushed them up. This is open here, so I'll be able to slide that other side of my strap in. But what I'm going to do, I don't think it's in the instructions, I don't like a facing that's going to pop up. So I am just going to do a little stitch in the ditch down the side here. So basically I want to do a straight stitch, align it up exactly where the stitching line is. I am backing it up. And then as I sew, I'm going to kind of pull out to the sides. Theoretically, you're doing it exactly in the seam line where everything is meeting, okay, up to all the way to where the facing ends on the bottom. Okay, this will be under your arm, so if it's not quite exact, it's not the end of the world. But that's going to hold the facing down so it won't want to pop up. So let me see here. It doesn't really matter what it looks like on the inside. On the outside, well, you can see I wasn't perfect, but I was pretty darn close. And if anyone is looking that closely underneath my arm, well, they have other issues to deal with. So let me go ahead and do that on the other side. You can see it's going to lock down that facing there. And then I think all we have to do is place the front strap and hem this thing. Okay, so what the instructions are telling me now is that they want me to put my strap in, but just pin it in place and then try it on. So, that's kind of tight. I don't know if I can just shove that strap through there. I may have to push it in with a hook or something. Hang on. Okay, I think what's working best for me is using my big old yarn needle I had from before, because I can thread my strap into that, and then just using that to push through here, reach through underneath. Well, it worked well on the other side. Again, I don't know that I would do spaghetti straps next time. Okay, there it goes. So it went through. Now I can let my little needle down, make sure my strap is not twisted. Looks like I need to adjust that just a hair. I'm going to pull so I have a couple inches underneath, not exact, you know, because I am going to try it on and adjust it. And then down here where I can feel where the bottom of my strap is, I'm just going to stick a little straight pin down here because there's just too much stuff going on up here to pin it. Okay, so this is my front now with my two pins on. I'm going to try it on real quick. So I had to actually pull it in quite a bit. I have, let's see here, because it was quite gapey and long. I have about doubled the amount. So this is where they had me pin it. I have about 4 inches pulled down. That's just where it fit better for me because there was a lot of gapey under the arm, and you know, I'm just not that showy. Now I do understand that this is probably going to be layered underneath things, and that's great. I just still don't want that much showing. So what I'm going to do is make sure I have these equal. It looks like I have this one about 1/2 inch different. So I'm just going to split the difference on these, match them up, pin them so that they're the same, and then go ahead and on my machine, here they are, stitch across here just to lock that in where it needs to be. Okay, so their next instruction is they want you to allow the camisole to hang overnight. And mine's just a cotton calico. It's probably not going to do anything, but I will do that step. If you cut it like a skirt on a bias or something, that's critically important before you hem it, because things cut on a bias that have any kind of weight to them will stretch all out of sorts. So you want to make sure that it gets its stretching out before you hem it up. But I'm going to go ahead, put this on my dress form, let it hang overnight, and then tomorrow morning I will turn the camera on and let you see what it looks like on my dress form and if it is distorted at all. I can tell you one thing at this point, when I tried it on, I like the way it feels this way. I like the bias, okay? That's just, you know, like bias cut slips and things. You remember those? They're fabulously comfortable, fabulously flattering. So far what I'm not liking is this. The placement of it and everything, and when I try it on you'll see what I mean. Okay, so it's the same night. I'm still in my non-fashionable look here, but you know what, that's okay. We will proceed. I wanted to show you this on my dress form. I think my dress form is a little overstuffed. I think I need to come in and pull some of her extra padding out, because when I tried this on myself, it was not nearly as tight as it is on my dress form. So, you know, just saying that. But I'm turning her sideways. You know, we added a few inches here on the top. I'm not sure exactly because my dress form is overstuffed, the leveling might not be exactly right. But the idea that I wanted to get across is you can kind of see how high it is. The waist is right here, and by the time we hem it, it's not going to be that much below the actual waist. But honestly, yes, you could tuck it in, but as soon as you start moving, I could just see it wanting to work its way out. So is what it is. We'll try it on in just a bit. If I had made this out of a very drapey fabric, and if this was a heavier, bigger garment, there's a chance that, you know, parts of it would want to drape fuller because it is cut on the bias. This is not. It's a very small, lightweight cotton fabric, and so it's not draping, you know, in any abnormal way. So what the pattern is going to ask you is if at this stage your hemline is looking like this, to go ahead, put it on your table and even it up before you hem it. Mine is fine. I'm just going to go ahead and hem it as is with a narrow hem. Okay, so down here on my table, I am just going to do a 5/8 inch or thereabouts narrow hem. And what that means to me is that I'm going to turn it up. There's the raw edge, about 5/8, 7 inch, and then just tuck the little raw edge under and stick a pin in here and move around the edge here. Right here where this French seam is, that is a little bulky, so I'm actually going to trim out some of that, you know, about 1/2 inch or so of it, and that's going to make it a lot easier just to fold this up and tuck in. So by the time I'm done, I'm going to have a narrow hem all the way around that's about 1/4 inch deep or so. And so I'm just going to use my machine, you know, make a little edge stitch right there along the whole hem, give it a quick press, and this little top will be done. Okay, so here it is, and I have it layered like, you know, I intend to wear it because, you know, middle-aged mom arms aren't that sexy. But if you remember this shrug from, I don't know, what was this, a couple months ago? You know, midsummer-ish, seems to work pretty good. These culottes from way early days, they work good, and I'm wearing them because they are a very high waist. And I think when I untucked it, hopefully you can see how the finished length is. And with that, you know, I did extend the front, you know, 1.5 inches or so. The thing I wanted to point out that, you know, I said I wasn't really a fan of was when I first put it on with the straps adjusted as they were, which was, I took them up another 2 inches. It was really, really gapey. Now, I did make my size on the sides 1 size bigger because I wanted to make sure I had enough room in here. And you can see I do have plenty of room, you know. I have plenty of room here. And technically, if I did not make that change, I probably still could have worn this, you know, because I've got excess now. But where these little points are here, they don't really line up where the traditional bra strap area is. And spaghetti straps themselves, you know, they're not going to hide anything. So for me, this is strictly for layering, because if you're old school and you don't want your bra straps to show, really the only way you could get away with it is not wear a bra, which is not, you know, part of my life. Or wear a strapless, which defeats the purpose of a comfortable top. So layering it shall be. If I was to do a top like this that I liked and I would redo, the points here and in the back would line up where traditional bra strap area is. And I would make the straps probably at least 3/4 of an inch wide, so I would have a better chance of disguising those straps, so that if it was, you know, hot days, right now it's cold and misty days, but if it was hot days, I could wear it without a cover. So that's just me. You know, everybody's different. That's just my opinion. But got it done. I think that is it for this pattern. I'm not going to be doing the jacket because I've done a little cardigan looking jacket not too long ago for my daughter, and there you go. So I hope you liked it, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.
Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful lighthouses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.